Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we explore the world of technology and innovation with the trailblazers shaping the future. I'm Lee Haynes, and today I'm excited to say that we have been joined by Martina Johannesson, Senior Technical Product Manager working with AI and machine learning at Unity. Unity's long been a powerhouse in game development, real-time 3D and interactive technology. And with AI redefining creativity, the company is at the forefront of building tools that empower artists, game developers, and digital creators, and more. Martina's work sits at the intersection of AI and creativity, shaping how AI-driven tools can push creative boundaries, remove barriers to innovation, and redefine workflows for creators worldwide. Martina, a warm welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Hi, it's good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Really, really nice to have you on the podcast. And without further delay, let's get into it. Let's dive into the many topics that we're going to be discussing today. Let's start with your journey, though, Martina. Can you share a bit about your background and career path? What key moments led you to your current role at Unity?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I've been naturally drawn to tech. My parents used to run an IT consultancy, so that's kind of trickled down into our family. Me, including my brothers, have both, like all of us, worked in some way in tech or digital. It's either been me working hard to sell ice cream and get the latest gadgets, or me nagging a lot with my parents to get them. I think that's definitely been a major piece to why I'm here today. As a teenager, I also weaseled my way in through an internship to attend one of the first tech conferences for me. So back in, 2011 or something, I attended SIME in Stockholm. And that was really a turning point in understanding that people work in this. It's not just something that I've been curious about and wanting to learn about and staying on top of things, but it really has a scale and a lot of excitement in the industry. I've basically been part of the tech scene ever since in one way or another. I think another key moments, that was definitely a couple key moments that's influenced my journey, but it was really tricky because I did a bachelor's in business administration, because as an entrepreneurial family, I kind of saw that happening at some point in my life and wanted to get the foundations in. But I had a hard time getting a job because I didn't have a computer science degree. And so another pivotal moment was definitely applying to CBS for the digital business master's, which was kind of on a whim at the time, but turned out to be one of the best decisions because it solidified my position in the industry and also led me to my job in Unity right now.
Fantastic. And were there any, specifically with the kind of role of AI in the creative, process, were there any kind of early challenges or pivotal experiences that shaped how you think about the role of AI?
Yeah, definitely. I think I started out also, like I mentioned, I worked in tech and digital, but I also have a track record in the NGO scene. And so that makes you hyper aware of resource constraints and having to do a lot of things hands-on. And so the merge between technology and creativity, it kind of led me to redefine my definition of creativity, because before I was thinking about it as, writing or drawing, and I was really poor with handcrafts. But I realized that there's so much more to creativity, especially working in an industry that was resource constrained. A lot of it, you just had to get your hands dirty and learn by doing. So creating websites, social media was another entry point for me. But also problem solving is a very creative way of thinking. And I think it all boils down to this curiosity and just like exploring and getting inspired and trying things and then trying things again. And technology is really like the epicentrum for me to be able to do a lot of creative endeavors.
And Unity, where you are now, I mean, this has become, a cornerstone really of the gaming and creative tech world. What's it like working within such a large and innovative company? I mean, AI, I mean, especially in a space like AI and creativity, which is so dynamic. I'm curious as to what's it like in such a large and innovative company like Unity?
Yeah, I think the scale is really, really fascinating and super powerful, because it's when you zoom out, you realize that the work that you're doing can impact millions of people. And I think Unity is really in a very interesting intersection of, it started as a game engine, and then we made it free, and it opened up a ton of different use cases for other kind of creators to share their experiences with real-time 3D. And so scale is definitely one thing. The impact it has on the world with we have billions of players that are playing the games that are developed with Unity, also brings a lot of, we also have to take care of the users that we already have. And so there's a delicate balance there between innovation and also building solid products. And that is really tricky when it comes to AI, which is non-deterministic. I'm sure we're going to dive into that more later, but scale and also, attracting top-tier talent. And so constantly surrounded by really smart people who push the boundaries and make you challenge yourself and make you want to evolve and grow and learn in your day-to-day.
And what does your team look like at Unity? You're a senior technical product manager, like I said before. What's the setup of your team? What's the kind of environment there?
Yeah, I mean, we have a team of product managers working on AI in the org. And we have product designers, but the majority of the team is definitely engineering, right? So we have both engineering on the more, let's develop a package that fits into the editor side of things, but also machine learning engineers, as well as data folks, of course, to make sure that we understand everything that's going on. So it's quite a large team, but not in the standard, not if you compare it to other AI giants out there. We're pretty nimble, and we've gotten incredibly far with such a small team. And also, but I think that the smallness has really also gotten us to do a lot of things.
And I think you touched upon it before. Like Unity's role goes beyond it's going beyond kind of gaming, right? It's powering architecture, film, automotive, and more, right? How do you see Unity's role in like the broader creative industry? How do you see it evolving, especially as AI expands the possibilities, right?
Yeah, I think Unity is in a really interesting intersection because it's just your own imagination that can kind of put limits to what you can create with Unity. If you think about it, Unity is basically a way to visualize the world. It can be more or less realistic to the world that we live in. It can be more, pixel driven. It can have different types of styles and so on. And so I think, like I mentioned, we democratized game development back in the day. I think with AI, Unity has a chance to democratize creativity overall, and allowing more people to come in and create things. And so I think we're stepping into a new era of democratization with AI and for creativity. And so before, like back in the day when we opened up the engine, we saw it being used for so many unexpected use cases, and I think that's going to happen again. And it's going to be really hard to foresee where this is going to land. So we also make sure that we are, staying open-ended as much as we can. It's also, a non-deterministic system, and supporting as much of the different use cases you might think of. And so, if you think of also the flexibility of Unity, it is an open-ended platform that you use as an open-ended engine. And so every project will look different. Every user has their own way of doing things. And so supporting almost like an open-ended engine with a non-deterministic tool has its challenges, but it's also super fascinating to be in that. So I think it's going to have a lot of impact on the broader creative industry, both in the short term, but also in the long term.
I mean, AI-assisted creativity is like redefining workflows, artistic workflows, creative workflows, right? Can you share any cool AI tools or any AI tools that Unity has developed and the real-world impact that they've had on artists or on developers, for example?
Yeah. So we're developing different tools for different purposes, but there's a lot coming back to like, what is the major problem that we're trying to solve? And I think there are two main problems. There's resource restraints in the studios that are developing things or the companies, but there's also a lot of depth required that users and players want from the games. And so there's a constant need for content and interactivity and depth. And so we're working with creation AI tools, which is focusing more on the authoring side of things, of using the editor. There's a lot of processes in Unity that are repetitive, that take time. There's a lot of things that you have to understand and learn. And so we're trying to make it easier for people to use the engine overall. Yeah, it's the thing you would expect a ChatGPT to be able to do, right? So understanding Unity-specific questions, answering that. Yeah. And so being able to extract the context, to be able to actually answer things that are more relevant to the project that people are developing is really one of the key pieces to our strategy. And another piece is that we're currently beta testing, actually, which we're pretty excited about, is more of the what you would know as agentic workflows. So doing things on your behalf as a user. So think about like the computer use model that Anthropic has released. We have a Unity use pipeline that you can use to perform actions on your behalf, to minimize the repetitiveness, and all so that you can kind of stay in the flow longer as a creator. So you don't have to go out of the editor, find information, or just making the creation experience smoother. And then we also have some cool examples of runtime AI, which is essentially like AI in the game or in the experience. And so we have a product called Centis, which is our inference engine. And that is a pipeline that converts ML models so that they're runnable in the game. And we've seen some really cool examples there, like also non-gaming examples, such as being able to target and see which joint is being used in a physical therapy app, or meditation and mindfulness apps. And of course, also like generating match 3 levels on the fly. And so there's a lot of cool things there that are also addressing that second piece that I mentioned, which is more depth and interactivity in the games.
Yep. No, it's really cool to kind of hear its application in areas other than gaming, right? Because obviously traditionally when I'm thinking of Unity, my mind always goes to kind of game development, right? But it's also really
naturally
interesting to hear how it's used elsewhere as well, you know? And in general, how do you think AI is kind of helping creators break through these kind of creative blocks, or, you know, enhancing their kind of natural talents? I think I was reading the study from Adobe where I think it was 3 and 4, around 75% of creative professionals say that AI-powered tools help them overcome these kind of creative blocks, right? What's your view on this with those kind of using Unity's platform?
I think it's super powerful for that specific purpose, to overcome challenges that you might just not overcome, and then you're stuck in a process, or you don't ship something because it's just too hard to overcome on your own, or you don't have the people around you who you might need to ask. So that's a really important thing, and I think it's going to pave the road for a lot more experiences and a lot more games being shared in the future. And I think it's going to be absolutely pivotal. And like we said before, we have no idea where it's going to go, because everyone's creativity is very different and everyone has their own experiences. And so I think that's incredibly powerful and very inspiring. It's definitely one of the things that makes me get up in the morning, is thinking of how many more people can share their perspectives with the world around them.
Yeah, I think really it's so interesting and exciting, because I think the possibilities are kind of endless here, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the kind of human
Agreed.
creativity, but augmented by obviously these AI powered tools. But going on a little bit to these AI tools and benchmarking in creativity. I mean, AI is not just what we're talking about here is not just kind of generating image or animations or textures. It's also kind of learning how to put it, like evaluate creativity, right? So benchmarking in AI building and evaluations, can you walk us through, how this works or what this means at Unity? How does it contribute, for example, to building tools that push these kind of creative limits?
Yeah. So if you develop a more traditional product, you have other metrics that you can evaluate whether or not a service is doing what it's supposed to be doing. With AI, it's a bit more complicated because it's not necessarily if you have uptime or downtime, or click-through rates and those sort of measurements. It's more about what is the assistant in this case actually answering. Is it fulfilling its purpose? Is it doing it so effectively? And those are things that is really hard to measure unless you do benchmarking and evaluation. And this is something that the entire team feels really strongly about, and pushing the boundaries and making sure that we have evaluations. So we started about a year ago now, a little bit longer actually, to look into like how we could evaluate our system rather than just having subjective thoughts and perspectives on how things are comparing to other competitors and so on. And so we looked at our Unity certification, which is a test you can take as a creator and see if you pass, and then you have a certificate that you can show. And evaluated how well our system is answering those questions. And so that was the first step into like having a more Unity specific benchmark and evaluation data sets. And we started there, and then we evolved and became more specific and used internal subject matter experts to also build out the data sets, which turned out to be really tricky because we have an understanding of, high level things, but given that every project is unique and every user is using Unity differently, the questions you might get are also endless. Yep. And so we needed to be generalistic and understanding the overall system performance, but becoming specific is something we're working on and will never stop working on. And it's a close collaboration of having engineering and product driven data sets that we're creating to evaluate the system. And we're also using something called it's a LLM as a judge. It's an interesting paper. I recommend anyone to read it if you're in the field of benchmarking with AI.
LLM as a judge, you said, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's we're continuously evaluating. It's a really important piece of our pipeline, and we're making sure we don't have any regressions if we introduce new functionality. And we also, of course, benchmark all of the new models that are coming out, just to make sure that we're having the top of the line models available to our users for the specific purpose that they have.
So where do you think the balance lies between AI-generated content and human creative direction?
I think the need for editing creative efforts is really important. I see it unlikely that we'll step away from that. That is really where you can add your creative flair and your unique touch. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a lot of things that are looking very similar. And we might, but I think where the most successful games or experiences, I really think is going to be those that have the human touch, that have a human in the loop of creation. And that is also why we're focusing mostly on, assisting you in your creation flow and finding ways so that it does allow for operability and editing yourself.
Yeah. And you were talking earlier a little bit about kind of you mentioned the word context, and I'd like to talk a little bit about different kind of online discussions that I've seen in terms of like users struggling to use AI in game engines like Unity, others as well. I mean, I'm sure you guys are kind of working really hard on all of these aspects, but I think it kind of boils down to discussions about AI powered code generation and kind of 3D visualization. In the sense that like LLMs are getting, I think, in my view, incredibly good and like accurate when it comes to generating code, right? They're getting better and better, which makes them really, really good when it comes to lightweight tools. Like, you know, your 3JS, for example, where all you need is kind of a browser to render what the content that you're creating, 3D in this context, right? But when it comes to games or kind of game engines specifically, which include these kind of graphical user interfaces, like telemetry as well, these like game development's obviously graphics and coordinate driven, but getting an LLM to deeply understand things like spatial context, and this is what I mean, the kind of context you were talking about as well, or respond in a way that fits a game's environment is apparently, I don't know, I'm not experienced in this sense, but it's apparently really, really hard still. So the question is like, how do you see AI-driven code generation fitting into large-scale game engine environments like Unity?
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy task. I think it's going to be a very long endeavor, because as I mentioned, it's a game engine is it's a way to depict the world, and it's which is why, you know, there are struggles with understanding the world from an LLM perspective with physics and all those things. However, I think Unity is in an interesting position because we have all the physics systems in place. You can adjust the world that you have in Unity to adjust to different things such as gravity and all that stuff is already built in, and so. It is really tricky. I'm not saying it's not. It is definitely something we're struggling with every now and then, and for specific use cases. But it's also something that we're working on. But you're right. It's really tricky, and it's a work in progress.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's like we've spoken about before. It's just there's so many different use cases, right? There's so many unique cases that can be hard to. It's not like a one size fits all, right? It has to be adapted to the kind of use case.
Yeah, and everything also doesn't happen just in the IDE, right? So a lot of the work is happening in the editor, and so what we're trying to bridge there is making sure that you can use AI within the editor and have things adjusted in your scene that the IDE and the code don't have awareness of, how the things are relationally attached to each other. And you can go in now and say like, hey, these two game objects are not reacting to my preferences, which are XYZ. And then the assistant will go in and be like, well, you should have ticked this box, or you need to do this. And then, you know, what we're stepping into now is the territory of like, would you like me to do that for you? And so that's also super exciting to be able to, because that is, you know, the cornerstones of getting to being able to generate more things in the scene on your behalf.
Yep, exactly. What are the main goals or standards you and your team strive to meet when you're evaluating and you're refining these AI models?
Well, there's a lot of things that we need to think about in terms of a usability perspective, of course. So we've decided to make the UI as toned down as possible. Not toned down in the way of not looking good. We have really great designers and a really good engineering team. However, to support non-deterministic outcomes and workflows, we can't be too prescriptive in the UI. And so we basically decided to build a pretty dynamic UI just to make sure that we are allowing for new developments and pulling a lot of the logic in under the hood that, you know, historically or traditionally might live in the front end. And so that is definitely a goal for us, to make sure that we're nimble in introducing new tech under the hood that can surface in the UI, and trying to do that in a very smart way. And then, of course, we're coming back to the evaluations and benchmarking. I can't share specific numbers, but it's important that we stay and are using the models that are performing the best for our different purposes that are at our disposal, both open source and closed source models. So I think it really comes down to benchmarking. It comes down to customer, like talking a lot to customers and understanding their themes, what they might be struggling with, and incorporating that into benchmarks as well. And testing and iterating and testing again, and then shipping and making it available. But I think there's a balance to be struck there too. And if you are, again, looking at the Unity user base, I think a lot of PMs might disagree with me saying this, but we're serving such a big audience, and it's difficult to slice and dice your personas or your target audience when you're shipping to everyone. And everyone has a very unique way of doing things. And so we're leaning into, extracting the context so that we can provide the LLM pipeline with the most relevant information so that it's relevant for whatever it is you're doing.
And what role does user feedback play in the development of tools at Unity? I mean, there must be, like you said, there's so many kind of unique use cases, but also users. So kind of this hyper personalization must be quite tricky as well. But this user feedback, how does this impact the development of tools?
So there's two types of feedback, right? So it's both like talking to users and understanding their workflows, and then synthesizing that to influence their roadmap. Then there's also the usage feedback and the usage patterns. And something we're leaning into is definitely understanding, like, what are users doing with the service right now, and basing our decisions off of that. And so we also, have to make some bets, and those bets we've made informed by our internal subject matter experts. We have a lot of people who are working at Unity who are game developers, who are, supporting in production games that are not Unity created, but it's other studios. So leaning on those, and just having an overall picture. I think that's, one of the trickier but also powerful things as a PM, is to synthesize all of the things and set a path forward that provides not only direct outputs, but also building blocks to be able to end up in a favorable future. But it's something that, it's a never-ending process, and we've taken steps using AI to actually analyze the feedback too. But building AI products is somewhat new, and so it's a lot of discovering too, of like, how can we do this? So it's anyone who says that product management has a super clear, blueprint, I would disagree. Of course, there
not
are
in the field of AI,
things.
at least, right? Yeah.
No, exactly. And so there's a lot of hands-on testing things, and trying things and see how it goes.
Yeah, an extremely iterative process, which you mentioned earlier, as well. But I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of challenges and also breakthroughs as well, if possible. What have been some of the biggest kind of hurdles that you've stumbled upon in developing the tools that you guys have been developing? Have there been any kind of major roadblocks that have shaped your approach to how you guys work, for example?
Lots. I feel like we have a lot of challenges that we're facing, and have pushed through. To start off with, we scaling is an interesting thing. It's one thing to build a prototype. It's another thing to ship it. It's a whole different thing to ship it, especially in the context of an editor that serves so many users and also so many already in production games. So, respecting our legacy and supporting the existing workflows while also introducing innovation, really challenging. And that's a balance you got to strike as well. And so that's definitely top of mind. Again, another thing that is interesting is that we've been pretty risky or like taking a lot of risks because we've tried to introduce new tech as soon as possible. But there's always a risk of underwhelming users. So what do you do then? Like we need the feedback, we need the usage, we want to ship it. But if people get a really bad first impression, it is AI after all. We can't know if it's going to serve this user specifically. Versus waiting until it gets perfect. And with AI, it doesn't.
No, exactly. And that must be a super hard balance to strike because it's like you say, you don't want it ultimately to be underwhelming in that kind of first impression. But at the same time, you might miss a golden opportunity if you do wait, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's it's a tricky balance, but it's also really exciting to try and get that. So we've had several betas for different features to kind of get first rounds of feedback on things. We've done private testing sessions just to like minimize the risk of a lot of underwhelming sentiment. But it's inevitable as well in the area of AI, and so it just comes with the territory, and you got to be a bit resilient to see that happening.
Yeah.
Another thing I think is interesting is the balance between control and automation and transparency. So, like, if you have a system that is you're using and you don't know what's going on under the hood, which has been the historical case of what we've seen in the world of AI tooling, and you don't trust it, or you have a project that you've been working on for a long time, and you have this agentic workflow or running commands, which is what we call it. How comfortable do you feel having the system do it for you if you don't know what's going on? And so that was a major piece of feedback that we also got, and it made us not only show the command that it's about to perform, but also allowing users to edit, because since it is generated on the fly, users often see, oh, but if I just go in and tweak it there, I know it's going to work.
Yeah.
And so allowing for customizability.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that word, customizability. Yeah. That's super.
Yeah, but it's another trickiness, because once you introduce transparency, it's hard to remove it. And we're moving into a world where we have orchestration under the hood, and we'll route the question to whatever tool it deems most relevant, or whichever tools are most relevant to the user's query. And so what happens then?
And maybe a chance for you to kind of boast or kind of shout about any tools that you have been a part of building. But are there any kind of standout examples for you of tools that have enabled creators to achieve things that they might not have been able to achieve without, Unity's kind of platform here?
I would love to. I don't have the flexibility or the ability to be super transparent about specific tools for various reasons, or for various, for studios that have used it. But what we're seeing is overall there's a lot of excitement, a lot of, overcoming hurdles quicker. People see the potential for troubleshooting and doing a lot of these repetitive tasks, as I mentioned. And so the challenge with productivity tools is that the gains are hard to measure. But it is, we're seeing some really cool indicators on that being the case.
Mm. And I'd also like to get your take, like your general take, really, on kind of just like ethical concern here. I mean, we don't need to go into kind of details in your team or at Unity per se, but it's more like with AI generated content, booming really, these ethical concerns around the content that is being generated, the deep fakes, ownership rights, and all of this are clearly growing. How do you think it's best to kind of address these concerns? What considerations do you have regarding this?
So many. Personally, but also things that I bring into my role, right? And so when you think of Unity and games, there's a lot of weapons, that is present in games, and there's a lot of violence that can be introduced in games too.
Yeah.
And so it actually is something that we take really seriously in our content filtering. And so we built our own system to make sure that we filter out any conversation that might be harmful. And we're leaning on the safe side there, just because there are, because of games being violent, could be at least, and might introduce weaponry or whatever. People might use it for that purpose and try and jailbreak it. And so we're really, we took a step further than just applying any out-of-the-box solutions that are out there to steer on the safe side.
Yep.
And sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's another piece to this, which I personally feel strongly about, which is when looking into fine-tuning and fine-tuning models, there's a lot of data out there that are male-created or that are created by just in general, like understanding the bias that lives in the data that you might use for tuning.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about full parameter training now, but that is more important then as well. But it's fascinating because I believe language has a very important influence on people. And so this is, again, like a personal opinion, but when I think about this, I think about how we're subconsciously impacted by language. And so providing people with a service that has subconscious biases that in turn develop things that influence people. Yep. And that in turn influence people who are playing things. And there's an interesting dynamic there. And there's an interesting sense of responsibility for me that I take very seriously. And I, want more people to think that way because there are things, to my understanding, this is where my machine learning team is, and the engineering overall are just incredibly smart and capable, but you can adjust data sets. It all comes down to math, right? And so being aware of that, you have options and the ability to change data sets and in the tone and how it comes across when you do train models or tune models. I think it's an important thing that more people should learn and consider.
No, I think it's a really, really good point, particularly just being aware of these biases that exist today and that might be going into these models, right? Because this AI generated content is only going to account for more and more of digital media content as we move forward, right? So it's super important, like you say. But onto quickly the future of kind of AI creativity and everything. Where do you see like this intersection of AI and creativity evolving in the next few years? I was going to say like 5 to 10 years, but I think it's just far too far to look ahead in the age of AI, right? So in the next few years, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about our talk today, and I was thinking about how creativity overall has, and Unity has an interesting part in future creativity, because as I mentioned earlier, I do believe it opens up more venues for sharing stories. And I started thinking about this experience I had what was it, maybe 10 years ago or something, I attended this tech conference, and UNHCR had a collaboration with Samsung. And they basically showed the inside world of a refugee camp with VR headsets. And it showed happy kids running around, playing soccer, playing video games and PC games. But what I also saw was a disproportionate time between boys and girls having access to computers. And seeing that in that version of virtual reality really impacted me, both like personally on like values level, but also in empathy towards other people and wanting to understand different people's perspectives. And so I think when we think about the future of creativity, more people are going to have the ability to share stories like that. And in their case, it was a video. But I do think that games is a really powerful medium to be able to convey emotions, to convey experiences and stories. And the more people who are able to share this, the more empathy I think we'll have towards one another. And as long as we're open towards taking it in and reflecting upon it, I think it's going to be a really pivotal piece to, being able to break a lot of filter bubbles that we live in currently. And so for me, the whole premise of creation in AI is that it's not creativity versus AI, it's creativity plus AI, and amplifying your creativity with the tools of AI to levels that we cannot foresee. But I really think that, amplifying unrepresented voices and people who haven't necessarily had the means or ability to create things will be able to. And that is really exciting for me.
Yeah, it's like the democratization of these tools, like you were saying earlier as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think, before I start to wrap up, is there what's next for your work at Unity? Anything exciting on the horizon that you can talk about, or?
I can't go into depth.
No,
but there's lots of cool stuff happening, and lots of cool work going on to, I think there's a lot of fundamental pieces that we're working on to just prepare for a more agentic future. Disseminating information like in Unity on how to contribute to our services, something that we're taking a lot of time to figure out. And I think that will build something that's going to be pretty reliable and pretty scalable, and also solving all kinds of problems and opening the doors of creatives all around the world, even more so than what we've seen so far. And so I think we're doing all the right things around the tooling that we're developing. There's always an element of speed, of course, and staying ahead. And keeping up as well. Like the industry is moving incredibly fast. But there's also a matter of, sticking to what you believe in and what we've mapped out as opportunity areas, and making those bets and trying things and stepping into the unknown. That's something we've done consistently as well, of just like, okay, we don't know how to solve this, but let's try. And so having that mindset is really I think going to be super important, because we have plans, right, of what to develop, but that can shift in a heartbeat because the industry is moving so fast. So it's all about staying super curious and continuing to make bold bets.
And finally, Martina, do you have any words of advice for anyone like looking to get into your field of work, like, technical product manager working, focus on AI and machine learning? It's just becoming a much more kind of competitive industry, right? Do you have any words of advice for anyone listening that might be looking to get into this field of work? Or even like what skills they should, focus on attaining, for example?
Yeah, I think cold calling or cold messaging on LinkedIn is an undervalued thing to do, to just connect and learn from people. Like being curious and not being shy for asking questions, but also not being shy of cutting through the noise and saying what you think. And so those are maybe not tangible skills, but I would say another thing is definitely just getting your hands dirty. So when I started out, it was more about like no code solutions that led me into creating websites. And then I started understanding code, even though I started with no code. And so just getting in there, trying different things, and then seeing where what makes you tick, and then going for it. When you have the opportunity of trying something new that excites you, just fully invest, commit, and just try things out. And then things will you will learn a lot. And then because I think it's hard to say tangible things. Of course, there's always value in understanding like coding, and I would definitely encourage like using the tools that you are that you want to build, and seeing the possibilities, because that also sparks a lot of inspiration. But yeah, and evaluations, like I think something that is becoming more and more relevant, as I mentioned as well, like writing benchmarks, writing evaluations. How to do that is an art. And so I think that is going to be more and more important too.
Very wise words, Martina. Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add before I wrap up here?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me, Lee. It's been a pleasure.
A pleasure having you, Martina. Thank you so much. Really nice to kind of, of you to share your journey, your expertise with us. Really interesting conversation. So thank you very, very much for joining us. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share it with your with fellow innovators. And until next time, keep creating, keep pushing those boundaries, and keep building. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.